Week 9 of the NFL season, has come and gone. We're going to get into all the crazy stuff that's happened, and we're starting to see who's a pretender and who's a contender right now in the NFL. Let's talk about next on Beyond the Locker Room. Week 9 is in the books. Let's go through some stuff. As always, I'm going to try to break down 3 games and tell you my thoughts on what I see from a bigger picture standpoint. So let's get into the game 1. I'll go with the one that everyone's going to be talking about. As the week came about, Chiefs Bills. We're going through it one more time, one more again. Here we go, Chiefs Bills, and this is actually a legit rivalry. There's certain times that the rivalry word gets used or gets overused when it's not really a rivalry. But this is a legit rivalry. We'll see if the pattern maintains. The Bills end up winning, 28-21, and we're gonna find out. We're gonna find out how real this is this year. We've seen in the past the Bills win the regular season game, and then when we get to playoff time, the Chiefs take it to another gear and find a way to get the dub. So this is going to be interesting if this pattern holds this year. Once again, I would say more than any other time with Bills Chiefs, the Bills seem more in control of this game more than probably anyone I can remember in recent times. Even though the Chiefs got off to the good start, it never felt like if Buffalo was in danger of losing the game. They were moving the ball well, using their tight ends quite a bit. Kincaid had a big game. Knox had a few big catches. Also, too, the running game Cook was solid. It's been solid. It's probably been their best asset pretty much this season. I think for even last season, I think everyone thinks of Josh Allen tossing the ball over the place, but when it's all said and done, they really are a running team at this point, and they've kind of morphed themselves over the years to that, which really, when you think about it, for a Buffalo team, which has always been odd with Buffalo, because Buffalo's had a lot of great passing teams for a team that plays in such bad weather in the playoffs. So it's been odd that they've taken some that type of approach on offense, but they kind of moving themselves towards a much more let's say conservative, maybe balanced attack, where the offense is being led more by the running game, which sets up Allen and his explosiveness, which I think in theory is probably the right bet. Defensively, it was one of their better outings in a while because that's been the weakness. They've been susceptible on the defensive side, especially in the secondary, especially against the run, I should say. And they held up well this time around. Kind of balled up Mahomes well enough. And I think that's good for them moving forward. We'll see if that's for real as time goes on. But it's a step in the right direction if you're a Bills fan. If you're Bills Mafia, this is a good way. This is a good step a good stepping stone for you. On the other side of the ball, the Chiefs. After it looked like they kind of got themselves together a little bit, I had a sparky in the eyebrow, let's put it that way, on how, if things really had turned around. The defense in this case had been suspect early in the year. They had some good moments the last couple of weeks, but I also was questioning a bit of the competition at times too, even though I would say Detroit was a big win and they did well there, and we'll get to Detroit a little later on in the pod. But I was wondering a little bit if this was real still, and the defense at times looked okay, but once again, man, when push came to shove, they couldn't get off the field. And I think that's gonna be a problem. I'm not sure what's going on with Spags, if they're just tired of Hero, if everyone's kind of caught up with his blitz packages. I don't know what it is, but KC's getting figured out right now for a defense that was as good as it was last year. Offensively, I think, I don't think all of a sudden Mahomes has gotten Mahomes has been pretty good actually this year if you look at the numbers. But I think when it's all said and done, they won Super Bowl without Tyreek Hill, but as time goes on, that loss is looking, as a greater loss more and more because they just don't have a threat down the field. And it was okay when you lost Tyreek Hill, and Kelsey was still in his prime. And you could play him almost like a deep threat because he commanded that much attention, that much gravity. He's now at the end of his career, kind of like the waning years of his career. You don't really have to pay as much attention to him from a double teaming standpoint. He still has his moments, don't get me wrong, but he's not the same type of threat as he was 3-4 years ago. And the receivers that are coming up now, none of them, Rice, pretty good, but none of them are really game breakers in that same way. as he had with Tyreek Hill. And I think I don't know, it doesn't matter what happens, they got to draft themselves a big-time receiver this coming draft. So we'll see what happens with the Chiefs, but like that's to me is those two big concerns. What's going on the defense, and if it's like, they've been figured out, and they got to find a way to get a deep threat to kind of loosen things up for them, man, because right now they're getting balled up. And even their front line, I mean, the offensive line at times have been a little queasy, man. I mean, I've seen Patrick running around with his head cut off trying to get out of trouble a lot this season. So there's still a lot of things, that they're papering over that I think might come back to bite them as we get later in the season. But so far, they've been able to kind of hold the fort together at the moment. And there's been other teams in the AFC that haven't gotten away from them, so they're still in the mix, which makes them always dangerous. Game number 2. So, my beloved Steelers, I'm breaking down again because they're in a big game this past weekend with the Colts. This was a game that both teams had to kind of show and prove a little bit. The Steelers have been kind of up and down the last few weeks, and kind of like, can they steady the ship? What's going on with the defense? And on the Colts side, it was like, okay, are you for real? They only had one loss coming in the game. Like, it's like, are they a paper tiger, or are they really a big time team to be considered as a threat for the Super Bowl? And I'm not sure if we got all the answers we had, but I think let's start with the Colts side. I would say that was a bit disconcerting if you're a Colts fan, as my cousins are. And I kind of teased them a little bit as the game was coming to an end. They just chuckled, yeah, because, I like the Daniel Jones experiment. As I said earlier in the season when I had a Colts discussion, I don't know if that's who I feel like I want to go to war with when we get to January. And he wasn't horrible, but it wasn't great. I think really they sold out on the running game, the Steelers, and I just don't know if you can have Daniel Jones trying to beat you. I just don't think that's something I would put, may not say it too loud, but put money on. Let's put it that way. But so the Colts, defensively, I think the Colts, which has been pretty good this year, the Steelers moved the ball pretty well on them. Had plenty of opportunities to move the ball and obviously scored at a fairly good pace. That's something actually, for the most part, as the season's progressed, the Steeler offense has gotten better, it seems like, as the season's gone on. So I guess kudos to number 8. But kudos to number 8. Like, I gotta give him, give Jack his jacket. Gotta give him his due, man. They've been playing much better and much more efficiently, let's put it that way, on offense. I would say also, too, defensively, I think I need to see a bit more from the Steelers defense. I mean, Watt had one of his better games this season. He was fantastic. I mean, overall, the Steelers defense was really good. I just don't know if that's real. I mean, it is a good opponent, so I got to give due there. The Colts are no pushovers, but I got to see more consistency. But that was a step in the right direction because, the offense is probably good enough to kind of, make them a dangerous team if they ever could get things going, figured out in the defensive end. So we'll see where they go to. They lead the division still, at 5-3. They lead the division at the moment. So we'll see what happens in the AFC. Cincinnati's still kind of hanging around, so you gotta be careful with them. Baltimore's gonna start getting guys back, including who. Obviously they got back, so like that's they're gonna still be reckoned with, I think, before it's all said and done. But it was an entertaining game. For the most part, I found it was an entertaining game. A lot of Steelers games this year have not been that entertaining, to be honest with you. But this one wasn't too bad. So I'll leave it there at this point. We'll see where things head to for both these teams as we head to the second half. Game number 3. So I'm going to jump over to the NFC, get my NFC on here. And I've been focused on this division a lot this season. If you noticed, I've been having a lot of my marquee matchups I've been following have included teams from this division because honestly, I think it's the best division in football. The records bear it out as well too. So we're NFC North. You see here that all 4 teams are 500 or better, which is pretty impressive. Lions Vikings had a really entertaining game, really interesting game. Minnesota kind of got on top of them early. Detroit was playing a big catch up. I think once again with Detroit, man, the defense, man, like it's like I'm not saying that it was horrible or anything like that, but like McCarthy was able to move the ball at times pretty well. And I think, that defense is going to be something that's going to be questionable as we get later in the season. We saw last year Washington lit them up, so we'll see if it can hold out. But it was a big game in this case here that Detroit lost, considering that they're going back and forth with Chicago's got in the mix, and of course Green Bay. That was a costly loss in your own division. You never like to lose those type of games. Minnesota, on the other hand, are hanging around. They're 4-4. They're hanging around. They're finding ways, to patch things together with, quarterback play being inconsistent, obviously with, changes, injuries at times with McCarthy. They've found a way to keep it together, and they still have a lot of talent out there for Minnesota. So who knows? They could get on a run in the second half, if the schedule works in their favor. So that the purple people eaters are a team to watch. For my boy there, he knows who he is. Hey man, I know he's always very pessimistic, with a very much a Charlie Brown mindset, as he always waiting for Lucy to pull the football from him as a Vikings fan. But I'll just say this much: I think they're a team to be reckoned with, and they can be in the mix when it comes to playoff time. So keep an eye out on them. So, that's it. That's what I have for Game 3 on that one. Locker room takes. Not too much, I would say here, just mentioning, since I'm doing this a day later, Cardinals take care of Dallas, and I said it before, man. I said it earlier on with the Dolphins and Dallas that those two teams are bye-bye, and Dallas tried to get stingy, try to hang around a little bit, but you weren't fooling me. You weren't fooling me one bit, and I think that was like sayonara for them. From that perspective, is a wrap for them. Miami, as I said before, speaking about them, they got lit up by Baltimore. They got lit up. So I think a lot of teams that people thought might be in the mix are now kind of coming to an end for them. That even the silver and black, as I mentioned before, I think people thought they'll be better than this with Carroll and Geno Smith. I don't think they thought what we're seeing now would be what they have, which I think they have 2 wins. So that is unfortunate. As I said before, I'm always got a little soft spot for the silver and black, even though they're our rival, the Steelers. But, I always appreciate them growing up. So that's a shame. We'll see. The NFC is looking like the more, even though I think at the beginning of the year, the AFC looked like they're going to be the tougher conference. I don't know. And now I'm looking at the NFC, to me, the better teams at the moment, everyone's got a bit of a weakness. But to me, I think the NFC has a little bit more solid play from both sides of the ball with the teams in their conference, more so than the AFC. There's some big issues for even some of the better teams in the AFC. So we'll see where things lead to as we now head into the second half of the season. Oh boy, it's getting cold now. We're getting some snow soon, folks. So you know what that means, man. Run that ball, people. Run it. On that note, as always, you can find me weekly on Basketball Rewind with Kenya and Coach Roach. Check out what we got to say about the Raptors and around the association and everything else that's related to basketball. And as always, folks, you can find me on that thing called X. You can find me on Blue Sky, on Facebook, and of course right here on YouTube. Once again, like, comment, and subscribe. We always appreciate the comments, so thank you for the comments and the likes out there. And once again, man, take care. Peace.